Welcome back. This time we are going to talk about the Ukraine narrative in the United States, but also in Europe. Since March 9, 2022, I started proposing a new narrative, noticing the defects Biden's narrative have when it came to Ukraine. So pretty much since the conflict started, since February 2022, I call for a better narrative for Ukraine, not the message of solidarity with the small guy, Biden's message, but one based on the national interest. Putin's victory in Ukraine would make him Xi Jinping senior partner, and considering Putin's record in the Sahel and Syria, that would affect for the wars our relations with China, who is precisely interested in the long term in the global South, the Middle East, and Africa included. What make worse, even worse, the Biden's narrative on Ukraine was that fewer Americans are aware of Biden's gradualism that made the war bloodier and costlier and sank the chances of the 2023 counterinsurgency. So it's not surprising how, with such a poor narrative and terrible management of the conflict, Americans have been turning sour against Ukraine, and not just now, but for a long while, especially Republicans. The problem is that now, with Trump in power, Ukraine can will not be able to rely on the United States, and at least until 2029, if Democrats come back to power. And it depends. If they have another Biden, the answer is going to be a continuation of Biden 1. Yet, even if Merz takes the challenge of leading the West, I include the United States, assuming the United States comes back to sanity in 2029, to contain Putin in Ukraine. To do so, he will have to deal with the battlefront demands made by the Ukrainian army, which is still outgunned and outmanned. In other videos, I have explained why the fact that they are outgunned hurts the possibility of training, and therefore, because it makes much more difficult the rotation of troops, and makes the case the problem of troops much harder, because that prevents proper training and the creation of brigades that don't follow the fate of the 155 and 157 brigades. B. Merz will also have to deal with the problem of public support. And even though public support is still high, probably as a result of Putin's hybrid war, in the case of the United States, that the trend is not positive. Yeah, but even in Germany, the fact that Linke, the extreme left, and AfD, the extreme right, have made huge gains in the last elections, implies that Merz must take swift and decisive action. So he, different from Scholz, has enough results to show before the next elections. Otherwise, the support Ukraine has in German polls may vaporize, and follow what is happening in the United States. What definitely is not an option is keep following Trump's lead, unless in the best case, Merz wants to assume the shame of seeing Ukraine destabilized and submitted after all the treachery and blood spent on that war. The way and seeing that Ukraine if takes follows the path of Georgia with all the implications that will have in the case of will have for Europe in the case of energy supplies, and not only energy supplies. So, because remember 2022, Europe has also Putin, with if Ukraine is submitted, will have an even bigger leverage on in terms of the food in terms of the food market and fertilizers. Not to mention that a victory will make nuclear stability even more unstable. Closely interlinked with the narrative, the problem of the narrative is the issue of propaganda. Propaganda is not about war and doesn't imply lying about anything about its intention. In propaganda's purpose is to demoralize the enemy, to expose the falsehood of the enemy's narrative. That includes countering Russian disinformation with information. For instance, using the lessons from 2006, the Iraq War, when coffins were coming from Iraq, did a lot to change American attitudes towards that war. And yet, we never used the opportunities the Ukraine war gave us in a similar scenario. Bringing the war to the enemy is another way, making it feel unsafe. That brings another opportunity. Another opportunity would be using the grievances, the legitimate grievances of Russian soldiers and soldiers' wives and loved ones for the abuse committed against the Russian soldiers, pretty much because pretty much Putin uses them as cannon fodder, or the anxieties generated by an overheated economy that so far looks good, but it's a time bomb. It's because it's in an unsustainable path unless Putin can involve China in the war and extend the front to new wars. Putin would be forced, in the case of peace, to adjust the Russian economy to a painful adjustment. And yes, this propaganda should be tried at both the average citizen level and at the elite level, because in both it could be very productive. The Russian elite will not move against Putin unless they are convinced that the public cares so much that Putin's power's stability is in danger. And yet, the CIA has not even tried to use these opportunities or fail miserably at that important mission, something about which Democrats have not shown even the slightest curiosity. In another video, I have spoken about the problems of incompetence and waste in the Pentagon. Well, this is a case of incompetence in the CIA, and yet Democrats, by saying nothing, seem unaware or too cowardly to follow the example of FDR. And if so, how do they expect to gain the support of elites who need desperately an alternative to Trump? So I have explored very briefly, of course, I have written many tweets about these two issues, but they are pretty interlinked, so I wanted to present them together. The problem of Ukraine narrative detached from American interests, and of course, voters have not been able to connect the dots, and unfortunately, Democrats have not made the efforts, even try to help them connect the dots. And the problem that many people ignore, most people ignore, that is of the miserable, the way the CIA has failed miserably on this end. They have, just before I finish, the CIA have helped a lot the Ukrainian intelligence in other fronts. In the case of the intelligence about DIA is a case of more in the field of the Pentagon. It has been extremely helpful for Ukraine, to the point that when Trump suspended that help, the Ukrainians went blind, and curiously, that coincided with Putin's counteroffensive that took back Kursk. But I wanted to point especially this case of propaganda, because different from the case for instance, Stalin, who used similar lines to motivate the Russian people against the Nazi invasion. Different from that, in this case, the invasion is not the Nazi invasion, the foreign invasion, but it's Putin invasion, for purposes of just becoming the privateer of the enforcer inside the Yuan zone, which is very telling about the naive expectations of those who expect to win Russia back to the West to isolate China, which is extremely stupid if you consider that China is not belligerent and Russia is, and that Putin is not going to be naive enough to break with Xi Jinping when the new government may be a completely different government that would leave Putin and his oligarchs in limbo. So if you were Putin, you would not fall for such such bait. Even proposing that idea tells a lot about the academics who propose such idiocy. And having said that, let me leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
New 166 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, 1. The Fish and Wildlife Service, FWS, will immediately proceed to change its mission to extinguishing endangered species. As part of this process, DOGE will set the number of species this agency will eliminate every week and coordinate with the OM on the funding to make this goal possible. 2. DOGE will report to Secretary Little Marco weekly, if DOGE considers necessary, its progress on the restructuring of the State Department. As DOGE's senior advisor, Elon Musk already has his digital signature. There is no reason to distract Secretary Little Marco from his important mission in the Maldives, declared President Trump. Asked about the executive decision, Secretary Rubio requested once more an executive decision forbidding calling him Secretary Little Marco in official business. At the same time, he expressed his gratitude to President Trump for the new medals he will receive via UPS in the Maldives. 3. It will be forbidden for any court, including the Supreme Court, to disagree with any executive decision issued by the president to make America great again. As part of this decision, all judges will be part of Schedule F in order to facilitate their expedited removal in cases of non-compliance with this decision. Approached by reporters, Democratic Senate Minority Leader Schumer declared that, as a result of the "play dead" strategy, which replaced the "confusion strategy," though it's pretty much the same, he will lead Democrats into supporting this executive decision tacitly so at some time in the future, when they recover their voice, they can convince the American people that they were their best advocates all the time without them noticing the difference. B. New instances of meltdown at the Pentagon are uncovered as new signal scandal shakes the Defense Department. Among other signs of dysfunction in the Defense Department, new revelations show: 1. Misuse of the project to extract intelligence through drunkenness in the DIA, a project personally led by Secretary Hegseth, to engage in drinking parties with no clear intelligence goals. In his defense, Secretary Hegseth claimed that it was very difficult to remember the goals once the session started. 2. Hiring dwarves to spread false rumors about Peter Dinklage after the bad blood his advocacy generated in the dwarf community, and then using them in dwarf tossing competitions during intelligence through drunkenness competitions. 3. Having redacted his resume to hide that he had been dishonorably discharged from the Army due to drunkenness. C. Secretary Hegseth offered job as spokesman for Signal if he loses his job as Defense Secretary. Approached by reporters about a possible job at Signal in case he had to resign his position as Defense Secretary, Hegseth, showing great confidence, declared, "It worked for Kamala Harris as spokeswoman for Total Wine and More, so I can work for me too. Actually, I don't see any conflict of interest if I were called to do both jobs simultaneously. Yet, I don't lose hope that Jack Daniels will also make me a similar offer. If so, I swear to God that I can make the three of them simultaneously and show outstanding performance since motivation is key for performance. I learned that in the Army," declared Secretary Hegseth. D. As even the inclusion of drag queen scenes cut from the theatrical presentation failed to save Rachel Zegler's Snow White in Disney+, it had to be replaced by the 1937 animated movie and by Snow White inclusive with Terry Crews. Approached by reporters, CEO Bob Iger declared that, "Fortunately, we have the Haldol deal with Essential Pharma, which will help us break even with Rachel Zegler's Snow White, so the remake was not all we expected, but at least the shareholders will not be harmed." E. Secretary Rubio called back to Ukraine to look helpless in a photo op. Secretary Rubio returned to the Maldives right afterwards. In a brief appearance in Kyiv, Secretary Rubio, clearly emotional, declared that, "I almost feel I don't deserve my medals. The 6 of them that President Trump has granted me after my missions in Tonga and the Maldives and the ones he is sending me via UPS to the Maldives while Elon Musk restructures my department." When reporters asked him about the progress of the ceasefire in Ukraine, the state secretary was clear, "I don't know. President Trump didn't tell me." FDNC Chair Ken Martin makes a call to the nation to have their priorities clear and support Rachel Zegler's Snow White on Disney+. The Democratic leader urged all Americans not subscribed yet to Disney+ to do so. Frustrated with reporters who harassed him with questions about when Democrats were going to present an alternative to Trump's redefinition of government and the place of the United States in the world, Chair Martin responded, "Enough of focusing on boring stuff. Snow White is sinking in Disney+ rankings, and you keep asking me about democracy, the economy, Ukraine, China. Enough. Let's focus on the mission we have ahead of us, taking Snow White to the first spot. We failed when the movie was in theaters. There is no excuse now. And for those of you who still want to talk about boring issues, go to Leader Schumer, who has already presented clearly our play dead strategy for the American people to go back to us when they are more receptive to our 2024 message. Trump is not cool." And now, if you don't mind, I have an important meeting with Sweet Baby Inc. to discuss the Democratic policy about the situation of DEI in video games. FDR possesses famed medium Matt Fraser for 5 minutes to give a message, full of expletives to today's Democratic Party. It's the first time I have felt such an overwhelming force, declared the medium before transmitting the message allegedly received from the president who gave us the New Deal. Pansies. Fuck $$ plus snowflakes. You are worse than $$ plus. Can't win an election against Donald Trump. You only win the fuck $$ plus elections you can't lose despite your best efforts. Even though I left you a fuck $$ plus playbook on how to win. $$ plus. $$ plus. You deserve to be bitten to death by your own mothers. Motherfuck $$ plus. What have you done to my party? That defeat Ken Martin worrying about Snow White when the nation is at the brink of a financial crisis, and that Schumer voting to give Trump powers over the budget like Orban's. Motherfuck $$ plus S. Motherfuck $$ plus S. Motherfuck $$ plus S. Eat shit and die. As Doge defunds medical research at the NIH, new unconventional treatments are introduced by HHS. 1. Additional doses of vitamin A instead of vaccination. 2. Bringing back lead-to-water pipes to reduce levels of anxiety in children. This is based on the Stoic premise, what you can't understand won't hurt you. 3. Use of chamomile infusions against measles twice a day. 4. Ending the use of fluoride in the water supply to prevent low self-esteem. 5. Inserting worms in the brain through the ear, based on JFK Jr.'s personal testimony about its beneficial effects. The new treatment will improve children's cognitive abilities, which will make Head Start unnecessary, and prevent autism. Recommended starting with 7-year-olds. 6. Blending little birds and mice to feed your falcons. If the patients have other pets at home, these must be replaced by falcons. Recommended starting with 7-year-olds. 7. Prayer. Department of Education will cut Head Start as well as math and science courses from American schools' curricula. This has a triple purpose, according to Press Secretary. Press Secretary Leavitt announced the following new guidelines in education. A. Replace Head Start as well as math and science courses with religious education. This change will count on the collaboration of snake handler preachers, and its goal will be to prevent the frustration of parents of being unable to provide better lives to their offspring than the ones they received from their own parents. B. Teach practical skills to the new generation to prevent the frustration of realizing that from now on, we are going to lose the edge in science and live simpler lives as a result of the consequential fall in productivity that gave America the edge in the past. This goal will also try to solve the trauma and the levels of depression of our youngest generation every time they try to perform basic math operations. Why increasing their levels of anxiety among our youth? It's better to use the opportunity to teach them to cope with loss. Besides, religious education will give them hope that, after living vicariously the good life of elite workers on earth, one day they will be able to live it for real in heaven, added Education Secretary Linda McMahon. C. Solve the frustration inherited from the Biden administration about Answer A, which reveals that American kids are hopeless in math and science. Why keep trying when there is no way out? Better to accept that the times when we were good in math are behind us and focus on what matters: Jesus's tax cuts and the scapegoating immigrants to make them die for our sins. J. Shang-Chi Marvel sequel cancelled after it was revealed that Canadian actor Simu Liu didn't have points on his driver's license. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on behalf of the Squad, brought the nation's attention to this concerning finding. I have talked to Marvel, and they have assured me they were not aware of this violation of representation guidelines. All Asians have at least 3 points on their driver's licenses, and Mr. Liu has none. How is it possible that Marvel has let somebody who clearly doesn't represent the Asian community play a superhero character in their name? What I have been able to learn so far is that Marvel is going to make up for their mistake by replacing this actor with a morbidly obese black trans woman in a wheelchair. If so, I believe Marvel may be on a good path to recover the trust of the fans, declared the Congresswoman before updating us in her struggle against the joint forces of the oligarchy and the patriarchy. FBI investigating case of burglar who befriended victims' dogs, extending investigation for the relation it may have with the Commander case. After hurrying to arrest Wisconsin Judge Hannah Duggan, the FBI decided to extend the investigation of this case to the inquiries into the crimes committed by Commander, former President Biden's dog. The probe started after President Trump revoked the pardon granted to his dog by the former president for the bodies uncovered from shallow graves in the gardens of the White House. Former President Biden's attorney, who represents Commander, declared that the treatment given to the ex-president's pet was unfair, considering that similar graves have been uncovered in cases believed to be related to people missing after being invited to the White House by the president's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, in the period 2017 to 2020, and that, far from being investigated, Trump's sons have been promoted to co-chair the Federal Reserve.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.